Hello, good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here at Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C Stewart and disappointingly it's only going to be me tonight as I go through the usual range of media interest and indeed news that is specific to those of us who watch. And it's a very summery day today here in Glasgow, and there's a sense of kind of summer gates and holidays and departures and arrivals tonight as we talk about former leaders leaving, the Transport Secretary also announcing today, and there are certain things about violence in the home which hopefully should be departed. We've got suspensions to do with Rutherglen, including suspension of disbelief over things like Google redactions, vapes and children. And in terms of arrivals, there's a plastics treaty on its way and a new JAG for women on contraception, as well as the return of a visitor centre and information and statistics with regards to those who are young and indeed suffering from poor mental health in terms of CAMHS statistics. So the usual range of things, but as always, we start with one thing, and that is the Ukrainian update on day 468 of the illegal Russian war against the state of Ukraine. Thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes, and an ecological disaster has been unleashed in southern Ukraine by the collapse of a major hydroelectric dam on the Dnipro River, which Kyiv said was blown up by Russia in a desperate attempt to ward off the Ukrainian counter-offensive. President Volodymyr Zelensky declared the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam an act of terrorism and the largest man-made environmental disaster in Europe in decades. He blamed Russian occupying forces, which have had control of the dam and the adjacent town since last year's full-scale invasion. Aerial footage showed the dam missing a broad midsection with the reservoir behind, which had been at record levels, pouring over it and roaring downstream. Towns along its path were inundated. Complete houses could be seen floating away in the waters, while countless pets and wild animals scrambled to survive. The governor of the Kherson region, Alexander Prokudin, said about 16,000 people were in the critical zone on the Ukrainian-controlled right bank of the river. He said people were being evacuated for districts upstream of Kherson city and would be taken by bus to the city, then by train to Mykolaiv and other Ukrainian cities, including, and here is where they always test me with regards to the pronunciation of Ukrainian town names, so my apologies if I get these wrong, but Khmelnytskaya, Odessa, Kropivnitskaya and Kyiv. Odessa and Kyiv are the ones I recognise. Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu accused Ukraine of blowing up the Nova Kakhovka Dam as part of a plan to redeploy units from the nearby Kherson region for operations against Russian forces, as either a Ukrainian diversion or a tactic which was meant to sweep away Russian defences on the left bank of the Dnipro River before the counter-offensive. There seems to be no immediate safety threat to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from the collapse of the Nova Kakhovka Dam, 200 kilometres downstream, according to Ukrainian and United Nations experts. The dam traverses Ukraine's enormous river, Dnipro, holding back a huge reservoir of water. The dam is 30 metres tall and hundreds of metres wide. Built in 1956 as part of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, water from the reservoir supplies the Crimean Peninsula to the south, which of course we know was illegally annexed by Russia in 2014. Shebekino district in Russia's Belgorod region is being shelled, local authorities told residents on Tuesday. Ukrainian troops have gone on the attack at multiple points along the front line in the Donetsk region on Monday, driving back Russian forces in at least two areas in what appeared to be the preliminary stages of Ukraine's long-anticipated counter-offensive. Ukraine has enough weapons to begin the counter-offensive, and the operation will give the country the victory it needs to join NATO, according to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. On Monday, President Zelensky welcomed what he called the news we have been waiting for from troops in Bakhmut, but gave no further details. Poland's agriculture minister has received a draft regulation from the European Commission extending a ban on Ukrainian grain imports until the 15th of September, he said on Monday. Belgium will ask Ukraine for clarification on reports that rifles made in Belgium had been used by pro-Ukrainian forces to fight Russian troops inside Russia's western border. And from Ukraine, we come into news with regards to more domestic affairs down in Westminster, as the House of Commons has voted to suspend the MP for Rutherglen and Hamilton West, Margaret Ferrier, for 30 days for breaching COVID-19 regulations, potentially paving the way for a by-election. Ms Ferrier lost her appeal last month against the proposed 30-day ban from the Commons over COVID rule breaches. She was found to have damaged the reputation of the House and put people at risk after taking part in a Commons debate, then travelling by train while she had COVID in September 2020. A court has ordered her to undertake a 270-hour community payback order after she admitted she had culpably and recklessly put people at risk. 37 MPs opposed the sanction against the independent MP, while 185 supported it, in a vote that would normally pass without opposition. Now, the issue, of course, is if 10% of her constituents in Rutherglen and Hamilton West now add their names to a recall petition, they will trigger a by-election, which will be a test of both Labour and the SNP, and Labour are hoping will give a boost to their chances in Scotland in the next general election. 32 Conservative MPs voted against Ms Ferrier's punishment, more than the number who supported it. Other dissenters were the former Tory MP Andrew Bridgen and 2 Alba MPs and the Democrat Unionist Party. Supporters of Boris Johnson have been accused of trying to prevent her suspension in the hope of preventing another person who happens to have breached COVID regulations in the past, a certain Boris Johnson, having to face a similar vote. Staying in Westminster, news today that Ian Blackford MP has announced his intention to stand down at the next United Kingdom general election. And in a statement from him today, Ian Blackford, the MP for Ross, Skye and Lochaber since 2015, having taken the seat after Charles Kennedy had been the MP there, he announced his intention to stand down whenever the next UK general election is held. In his statement, he said that with the SNP selection process for the next Westminster election taking place over the coming weeks, he has thought long and hard about whether to offer himself as a candidate again. He goes on to say, "It has been an enormous privilege to serve as the MP for Ross, Skye and Lochaber since 2015. I am grateful to the SNP membership for selecting me, and I remain privileged and humbled that people across my home constituency have put their trust in me at 3 elections. Serving as the local MP for this vast and cherished Highland and Island area has always been my priority. I was also honoured to lead the SNP Westminster Group for more than 5 years between 2017 and 2022. There were many highlights during that period, including leading the group into the 2019 election and increasing our representation from 35 to 48 seats. That campaign was fought on the twin issues of defending Scotland's right to choose our own future and standing against the impending threat of Brexit. Those issues remain more relevant than ever as families across Scotland suffer the impact of Brexit and damaging Westminster policies on the cost of living and our economy. During my time as Westminster leader, I was grateful for the support not just from colleagues in Westminster, but our friends in the Scottish Government as we came together as Team SNP to oppose Brexit, support the First Minister and her team in getting through COVID, as well as standing up for our communities as we continue to battle through the cost of living crisis. He finished by saying that he would like to thank all of those who have supported him in his role as a Member of Parliament. And from That Westminster News, we go to a battle with regards to unredacted COVID documents. And once more, the COVID inquiry seems to be heading for a row with the UK government. This is new over Google Spaces redactions. It's looming as the public inquiry's most senior lawyer voiced fears about a tussle with the government over messages sent on that Google Spaces platform. Hugo Keith, KC, said the same issue threatened to arise as with WhatsApps, which the Cabinet Office is refusing to hand over in full. The revelation that another major source of files could be censored by the government may fuel further accusations of a cover-up. Cabinet Office officials were dismissed by Mr Keith, who spoke at the first public hearing of the COVID inquiry since it was announced last week. A judicial review was being launched in a bid to limit its powers. Rishi Sunak signed off the legal move to push back against the inquiry's demands to be given unredacted files and messages. Instead, the Cabinet Office wants to decide for itself what material is relevant and hold back any, and it's quoted here, unambiguously irrelevant material from the inquiry. In January, the Cabinet Office said that Google Spaces, a group messaging platform, had been used during the pandemic by government figures to discuss COVID policy, according to Mr Keith. The inquiry asked for a full list of potentially relevant groups, their members, the number of messages and how long each space was active for, said Mr Keith. But it took until the end of May for the Cabinet Office to do so, something he went on to describe as regrettable. Work is only just beginning to extract the messages, Mr Keith said, adding, "We maintain that that material must be provided to the inquiry without redactions." Mr Keith also said that any redactions made by the government to messages on Google Spaces or WhatsApps would be, and he quotes again, wrong in principle and slow down the inquiry. And we move from Westminster into an issue which I think many parents have scratched their head over in recent time, as paediatricians have said that disposable vapes should be banned to protect children. Children's doctors are calling for an outright ban on disposable vapes to reduce their popularity among young people, as the long-term impact on lungs, hearts and brains remains unknown. The United Kingdom government should ban single-use disposable vapes, which can be bought for as little as £1.99 and most popular with young people, according to the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. This would, according to them, reduce their environmental impact and discourage children who have never smoked from taking up vaping, and risking long-term addiction and damage to their lungs. Dr. Mike McKean, the RCPH Vice President and a paediatric respiratory consultant, said the college had made a very carefully considered call, reflecting concerns from its members about the epidemic of child vaping, the limited research into the longer-term health impacts, and the small but growing numbers of children with respiratory problems. He said that while he thought Australia's approach, where vapes are only available on prescription, might overburden the National Health Service, England's permissive approach was out of step with neighbouring countries such as Scotland, France, Germany and Ireland. So far, England has banned free vape samples for under 18s and may prohibit colourful packaging and flavour names that target younger people. United Kingdom ministers had the power to easily ban disposable vapes, he said, and he hoped he would respond as fast as possible to submissions to the government's call for evidence on youth vaping, which closes on the 6th of June, to avoid the problem getting kicked into the political long grass before the next general election. If you're 12 and starting to vape, he continued, regularly we can't wait for that 12-year-old to be 13 or 14. We need action now. He added that he thought there was a moral imperative to prevent companies from profiting from long-term addictions by targeting children with colourful packaging and fruity flavours. The ban would also reduce the environmental harm caused by e-cigarettes, which waste lithium needed for batteries to power electric cars, and increase plastic waste, as 1.3 million vapes are thrown away every week in the United Kingdom. A Scottish Government report into the impact of disposable vapes will be published in the weeks ahead. Scottish Green MSP Gillian Mackay, who has called for such a move on health and environmental grounds, commented, "Disposable vapes create a huge amount of waste. You can see it on every high street in the country. They are bad for our environment and for our health." Ms Mackay said she hopes that Scotland can lead the UK, possibly as we did with other aspects of health-related policy, by banning disposable vapes for good. And keeping in an environmental theme, there was news today that the first steps have been agreed on a plastics treaty after breakthrough at talks in Paris. Nation-state representatives have taken the first concrete step towards a legally binding treaty to regulate plastic, described as the most important Green Deal since the 2015 International Climate Agreement. The banging of a recycled plastic gavel on Friday night at UNESCO headquarters in Paris signalled the end of a fraught process, marked by accusations of exclusion and industrial lobbying. Talks threatened to fall apart, but in the end, delegates were able to broadly agree on key elements that the treaty should contain, laying groundwork for a future agreement. Talks were attended by delegates from 180 nations, dozens of stakeholders, including civil society groups, waste pickers, and a coalition of scientists, and were the second of 5 meetings to thrash out the wording of the new treaty, which could come into force as early as 2025. The world currently produces almost 400 million tonnes of plastic every year. An estimated 14 million tonnes escape into the ocean annually. There is a growing recognition that this vast international problem requires a harmonised global response. Where plastic has historically been viewed as an environmental waste problem, critics now emphasise the array of harms this fossil fuel-derived and chemical-rich product causes to the environment and human health across its entire life cycle. The production of plastic has been shown to worsen air pollution, while its material waste intensifies flooding and starves wildlife. Plastic particles are now found in the air, in drinking water, and in human blood. Stakeholders used the talks to call for plans to manage microplastic pollution, regulate the thousands of hazardous chemicals baked into plastics, create a financial mechanism to support the transition, and protect the rights of people disproportionately exposed to plastic chemicals and waste, such as those in Cancer Alley, a region in the US state of Louisiana with a high concentration of petrochemical plants along the Mississippi. The talks began with fierce disagreements about procedure, which many civil society groups and country delegates, including prominent voices from Mexico, claimed was a stalling tactic by oil and plastic producing nations, which included Saudi Arabia and Brazil, together with fossil fuel and petrochemical lobbyists. However, a compromise postponed these procedural discussions to a later date, and observers to the closed-door negotiations said widespread agreement emerged on the potential core features of a future treaty. A majority of countries agreed that it should be global and legally binding rather than voluntary. Meanwhile, the World Wildlife Fund, the WWF, said that 94 of the 180 nations in Paris had agreed that some especially harmful polymers, chemicals and plastic products, which might include intentionally added microplastics and PFAs, which are forever chemicals, should be banned or phased out. So amongst all of this good news, the draft document will be written in the coming months as a springboard for granular discussions of the final treaty text. So in terms of progress there, we also had progress domestically, where women have been invited to join a trial of a twice-a-year contraceptive JAG, and this is in Lothian and Ayrshire with trials to test the effectiveness of the 6-monthly contraceptive injection for women in both of those local authority health board areas. If successful, the study will obviously expand the range of contraceptive options available to women, giving greater choice over how to control their fertility. Some 750 volunteers between the ages of 18 and 35 will take part in the study across 4 countries using a contraceptive injection. So we're part of an international study of DPOT. Now here is one. Medroxyprogesterone acetate, DMPA. We'll stick with the acronym. Similar to the existing injectable method. In the study, women will receive an injection of DMPA under the skin every 6 months. The contraceptive injection is used by 15% of women in the UK and currently involves injecting DMPA into the muscle on a 3-monthly basis. The DMPA contains the hormone progesterone, which acts to prevent pregnancy by stopping the release of the egg from the ovary. Researchers say the new method provides a more convenient option for delivery, with women required to attend 2 appointments a year for an injection instead of the 4 currently needed, halving the amount of time that they would need to attend, which would halve, quite clearly, the burden on the National Health Service. This could also lead to increased effectiveness. Having to inject less frequently should reduce unintended pregnancy due to missed or late injections, according to experts. Side effects could also be improved. The drug is absorbed more slowly when injected under the skin instead of into the muscle, resulting in a gentler peak in hormone levels. Moving to 2 injections per year would reduce the amount of DMPA injected into the body by half, which could lead to a more rapid return of fertility after stopping the contraceptive and further improvements to side effects, according to those who know, the scientists. The University of Edinburgh trial will be part of a global study, as I mentioned before, building on previous research of 21 women that showed that DMPA stopped all participants from ovulating, releasing their eggs, for at least 6 months when it was given under the skin. Before joining, study participants will be examined, have their blood tested to check that they are eligible and can take part. All participants will have scheduled follow-up visits to check their progress for the whole 13-month study duration. Volunteers will also be required to undertake pregnancy tests monthly with a check-in phone call to follow up on those results. Professor Sharon Cameron, the NHS consultant gynaecologist and honorary professor at the MRC Centre for Reproductive Health, said, "This trial of a new contraceptive method designed to be taken twice a year rather than the current 4 times a year could potentially offer meaningful benefits to many women around the world who are taking birth control. As it is injected under the skin instead of into a muscle, DMPA will last twice as long in the body, therefore offering a more convenient option and potentially fewer side effects compared to the current dosage regimen." And staying in health, and this is an area that I'm particularly interested in, child and adolescent mental health services, known in the business as CAMS, had their waiting times statistics announced. And for those of us working in care or working in any form of education, working with children who suffer from periods of negative mental health, none of these figures will come as a particular surprise, as the latest figures for waiting times for CAMS appointments was published today. And for the quarter ending March 2023, 74.2% of children and young people were seen within 18 weeks of referral, an increase from 70.2% for the previous quarter and an increase from the 73% for the same quarter 12 months previously, ending March 2022. Now, the Scottish Government standard states that 90% of children and young people should start treatment within 18 weeks of referral to CAMS. 4,920 children and young people started treatment at CAMS in Scotland, a decrease of 12.2% from the 5,601 starting treatment in the previous quarter, and a decrease of just under 1%, 0.7%, from the 4,954, nearly 5,000, who started treatment in the quarter ending 12 months previously in March 2022. Now, 1 in 2 of the children and young people seen started the treatment within an average of 9 weeks, the same as the previous quarter, but an increase from the average of 8 weeks 12 months previously, ending March 2022. Nearly 8,000, 7,701 children and young people were waiting to start treatment at quarter ending March 2023, an increase of 1.8%, an increase of 138 children and young people needing CAMHS intervention compared to the previous quarter. However, that is a decrease of 26% the same quarter ending March 2022. And 10,500 plus 10,556 children and young people referred to CAMHS in Scotland for the quarter ending March 2023, an increase of 3.5% of a further 355 children and young people compared to the previous quarter. And if you can hold on to those statistics, an increase of 5.5%, quite bizarrely, as I see 555 meaning 5.5% of an increase for the same quarter ending March 2022, 12 months before. Commenting, Mental Wellbeing Minister Marie Todd said, long waiting times are unacceptable and more work needs to be done. Well, we have seen significant improvements in the waiting lists over the past year. Despite record-breaking investment in CAMHS, the target of eradicating waiting times by March 2023 has not been met. The clearance of long waits is necessary for boards to meet their standard, and most of health boards have effectively eliminated the long waits for CAMHS, and that was for 11 out of 14 boards have now less than 4% of waits over a year. These figures are evidence of significant and sustained progress, including continuing record levels of activity. This has been made possible by the hard work of the CAMHS workforce, which has more than doubled since 2007. This progress has been made despite an increasing number of referrals for the service, which are now at record levels. And holding on to the idea of Scotland and how we deal with those who have to deal themselves with significant issues in terms of their health and well-being, a review today has recommended major changes to how violence against women and girls is tackled in Scotland. This is the report of the Independent Strategic Review of Funding and Commission of Violence Against Women and Girls Services, the VAWG, and it was published in Scotland today. The report sets out an ambitious long-term plan to transform VAWG work in Scotland, including the legal right to and guaranteed funding for minimum core services and compliance with international human rights conventions, which positions Scotland as an exemplar of best practice. If implemented, no other country in the world has taken these steps. The review included over 100 engagement events with women, children and young people across Scotland. It heard evidence that current services do not work for large numbers of women, children and young people, in particular those from minority ethnic communities, as well as older and younger women, disabled, including learning disabled women and deaf women. Providing a legal right to services means that funding for these services would no longer rely on short-term competitive funding rounds from a variety of sources. The review recommended moving to a model of collaborative commissioning, with decisions about funding made in the local areas close to where services are provided, rather than centrally, as it currently is at the moment. Scotland is currently not compliant with several international human rights conventions, including the Istanbul Convention, the Council of Europe's Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, and the UN Conventions on the Right of the Child, as we are not providing a full range of services to all who need them. To put Scotland in line with best practice developments at European level, the report recommends that a new body called the Istanbul Convention Implementation Observatory, the ICIO, is established and a VAWG commissioner appointed to ensure progress is maintained. Acknowledging that the proposals will require significant financial investment, the report argues that the current cost of VAWG are extremely high. To bring them down, urgent action is required to increase the focus on prevention. More importantly, it will ensure that increasing numbers of women, children and young people will not have to go through these terrible experiences. And the chair of the review, Leslie Irving, said today, I am confident that our recommendations, which are grounded in the evidence we have gathered over the course of the review, will allow us to take a very significant step forward in how we respond to VAWG in Scotland. It's time to make that commitment. COSLA's community wellbeing spokesperson, Councillor Maureen Chalmers, expressed support for the work of independent review, saying COSLA appreciates the commitment shown to ensuring local government involvement and the review's cross-governmental approach. I look forward to forthcoming discussions with COSLA leaders and the Scottish Government on its ambitious recommendations. And the report's recommendations will take several years to be fully implemented, and the Scottish Government and COSLA have been asked to provide a timeline for implementation by the tail end of this year, December 2023, with annual reports to the Scottish Parliament on the progress of implementation thereafter. And staying on the issue of health and well-being, it was announced today from Kevin Stewart, MSB, the Transport Minister, that he will be stepping down. He has tendered his resignation to the First Minister, stepping down from his ministerial post for health-related reasons. He previously served as the Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning from 2016 and Minister for Mental Wellbeing and Social Care from 2021. He was appointed Transport Minister in March 2023. Accepting his resignation, the First Minister thanked Kevin Stewart for his service, particularly his support during the pandemic. He said he hoped he would feel able to serve again in the future. In his letter, Mr. Stewart said that it had been the greatest honour of his life to serve the people of Scotland in 3 ministerial positions under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, and hoped that he had made a positive difference to the country. And of course, we always like to leave you with something that is slightly less serious, but for me, slightly more exciting, and that is that the birthplace of Mary Queen of Scots is to reopen to visitors. Historic Environment Scotland, HES, love these acronyms, it means that I don't stumble so much, has announced that Linlithgow Palace will reopen on Saturday the 10th of June, that's Saturday coming, with visitors once again being able to explore the site with over 2,000 years of history. Initially a Roman settlement, there has been a royal residence where Linlithgow Palace now sits since the mid-1100s. The earliest residence was severely damaged by fire and no visible features remain of it. After returning from captivity in England, James I began work on the new Pleasure Palace to replace the previous residence. The palace was a welcome rest stop for royals between Edinburgh and Stirling castles and was frequently in use. The elegant ruins seen today are the result of James I and his heirs' work. Access restrictions were put in place at the start of last year as a safety precaution, while HES, Historic Environment Scotland, who managed this site, carried out high-level masonry inspections. These inspections assess the impact of climate change and the condition of masonry at some historic sites at a high level, in combination with a number of other factors. These include the construction techniques used, both when built and subsequent repairs, as well as the geological vulnerabilities of specific stone types. Whilst climate change is not an issue unique to Scotland, HES is believed to be amongst the first heritage managers to proactively face this new challenge, with the results already being shared with peer organisations internationally. At Linlithgow Palace, a number of areas have been the subject of conservation repair. However, some minor access restrictions will remain in place while further work is ongoing. While HES had initially planned to reopen the palace in May, the reopening was delayed due to a recent incident of heritage crime, where walls, flagstones and the historic 3-tiered courtyard fountain were defaced with graffiti. HES conservation teams have been working to address and mitigate the damage caused, including to the 16th century fountain. There will still be some access restrictions in place at the North Quarter, including the King's Bedchamber and the Court Kitchen. All other areas, however, will reopen, including the Great Hall, Chapel Royal, King's Hall, Museum, Kitchen, Queen Margaret's Bower and more. Craig Mearns, the Director for Operations at HES, said, "We are very pleased to be able to reopen Linlithgow Palace to the public. Our teams have worked tirelessly, not just to make it a safe and enjoyable place to visit, but also to address the damage that was done to the historic site this spring. That work is still ongoing. We know that the local community and visitors alike have been eagerly awaiting the reopening, and as a result of our planned and completed conservation work, this amazing site can be enjoyed by everyone once more. And if there was a place to leave us for this evening with plans in place when it opens on Saturday, with the weather we have at the moment, that should perhaps be a weekend destination for many of us. But that is it for this evening from me here at Broadcasting Scotland. And before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of all of our supporters. And you'll see on the screen below me where you can help us out. Firstly, if you've already donated or you have signed up to make a regular monthly payment, from all of us here, it is a very heartfelt thank you. Our programmes will always be free to view. It's a commitment we've made. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. As we look around and see numbers of people volunteering coming in to work with us, it's the potential that we can invest in, that we can do more with. And we can't do that without your support. We have set ourselves an ambitious target, adding 10,000 new subscribers. That would enable us to employ staff, to make more programmes like tonight, or others that we would be open to look at various items and things out there from a uniquely Scottish perspective. And with that in mind, that's all we've got time for tonight. So from me, it's good night and thank you for watching.